All right, today has been a very interesting day. A lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of things connected to a lot of things I've talked about. So before I even talk about the Paris stuff, the Missouri coach now all of a sudden announces his retirement today. Um, and in my last video, I talked about how it ties into the festival of Lupercalia and how even like the death of Flip Saunders and the Timberwolves and whatnot, it all goes back to Teen Wolf. And Teen Wolf ties into Lincoln, Nebraska, and Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, the whole Civil War theme. Anyway, one of the things that I didn't mention in the last video was that Missouri's next game, they play BYU. Now remember, I talked about all of this before the BYU game even started because they killed Herbie, the actor who played in the movie Love Bug, who the Love Bug is Herbie. They killed him on 9-1, or he just died, whatever, 9-1. And then Nebraska played BYU, so I said they're going to kill Herbie. Tons of other stuff with it. But Nebraska ended up losing to BYU. It was crazily coded. I don't know with magic or what, how they were making the numbers fit and the yards to match up and whatnot. Just ridiculous. But BYU is also the Mormons, and the Book of Mormon is 239 chapters. It's the 239th year of the United States. I've talked about a lot of this. If you go back and watch previous videos, I mention this stuff over and over and over. And then BYU, even the next week, BYU played Michigan, I believe. Or they didn't play them the next week, but when they played Michigan, they were ranked number 22. And then when Michigan beat them, they became ranked number 22. There was a whole bunch to do with 22, but Michigan is the Wolves. And whatever, lots of other things. I'm going to move on, though. I wanted to show the... So this is the guy who resigned, the Missouri coach. His name adds up to 55, just like Timberwolves, just like Target Center, just like Minneapolis. You even had the guy, whatever his last name, the Minnesota Golden Gophers coach, who's retired as well because of cancer. And then now Missouri's coach announces his retirement because of his cancer. Flip Saunders died at the age of 60, which is the mirror of 55 this year. 1955 was 60 years ago. 1960 was 55 years ago. Talked about tons of connections dealing with Moses Malone, Daryl Dawkins, Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett was the first ever Teen Wolf in the NBA. But whatever, just interesting that he would resign today. He adds up to 55 as well. I've talked about how it all ties into Lupercalia. Also, just the word resigns, interesting, is 91. And I've talked about how 91 seems to be an elimination type number. I even talked about Cameron Wake, number 91, who had torn Achilles. He's out for the season. And then the next week, or 3 days later or whatever, the Miami Hurricanes won on the 91-yard play. But anyway, on with today. So I wanted to mention the other day, I didn't talk about it because I didn't have a whole video built up to it. But Nebraska is now 4-6, and they have 2 games left. They upset Michigan State. And of course, they drove the ball 91 yards with 55 seconds left. And then they scored the touchdown and tons of other stuff with that. But Nebraska is, they're probably even favored. I haven't looked at the spread or whatever. Most likely, I think they're going to beat Rutgers tomorrow, only for the fact that's going to make them 5-6. And I've talked about Abraham Lincoln a whole bunch, tying to Nebraska Cornhuskers. They even add up to the same thing. I talked about the Teen Wolf connection because it's Nebraska Cornhuskers are in the movie Teen Wolf. He even joins the Civil War play in the movie. But Abraham Lincoln died at the age of 56 in the year 65. He even died in Washington, D.C., which adds up to 56. There's a few other ones I can't remember them off the top of my head, but Lincoln is also surrounded by 34 and 43. A ton of 34 and 43 references. But anyway, in regards to today, Paris, France also adds up to 56. And I'll get back to that in a second. I just want to mention one more thing about Nebraska. So they have 2 games left. They're 4-6. I just have a good feeling they're going to win tomorrow and be 5-6 to match up with the Abraham Lincoln references. I also think that they might actually beat Iowa. I know it's kind of strange. Iowa did have Tyler Sash, who I think was a sacrifice or something to make them have a good season, but not necessarily a perfect season. The only reason I say that is because I've talked a lot about Skull and Bones, and Nebraska. The black shirts are they do the Skull and Bones, and it adds up to the same thing as Skull and Bones and whatever. But that would make their record 6-6, literally 66, adds up to 41 and 149, just like Skull and Bones. Just pointed out, Skull and Bones 149 and 41. Also, Nebraska plays a Memorial. I said black shirts, Husker fans. There's other ones. I'm just listing a few here. You know, this film Lincoln even came out 5 months and 6 days before the anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's death even. Just wanted to point that out. Also, some interesting 56s are Wolf adds up to 56. Kevin Garnett, like I said, is the first teen Wolf. He's definitely tied into this. I even seen an article today about the owner of the Timberwolves trying to sell a share of his whatever for the next owner. I talked about that in previous videos. Mark Wahlberg, 56. The reason he's significant is because of the Charlie Hebdo thing. And he's in a movie called The Truth About Charlie that came out in 2002. And at the police station in the beginning of that movie, they have a map up on the glass or whatever. And it literally is almost the exact location of Charlie Hebdo. I mean, it's just a small map, so it's pretty ironic they would have that, and the movie's called The Truth About Charlie. Also interesting, the very beginning of that movie, the guy dies on the train. I mean, we've talked about all the stuff, how it ties into train wreck, the Philadelphia train wreck and whatnot, so I don't know. A movie to check out if you haven't seen it. Also, the attacks today are believed to be by ISIS 56. Another interesting 56 is James Garfield. He's the second president to be assassinated. He literally died on 9/1/9, the 91 forward and backwards. In the year 1881, interesting, it's the 1-8 and the 8-1. Literally, today to 1-8 is a span of 56 days. Also, 8-1, August 1st, the mirror of that. It is the 213th day. Lupercalia begins on February 13th, 213. Also, in regards to Abraham Lincoln, this is the day that he was born, the 43rd day of the year, 2/12, the 21/12. Talked about that a lot too, but it's from today, it's a span of 91 days. Also, I know this will probably change, but literally for the last, oh man, I got home at probably 7:30 or something, and it has said this on CNN. It even still says this on CNN, 153 killed. And the reason that sticks out to me is because literally the 153rd day is June 2nd, the 6/2, all ties into Queen Elizabeth and whatnot. Interesting also that Prince Charles, her son, turned 67 years old on the 14th, so the next day. But it's also, there's 212 days remaining. So the 212 reference. Also just kind of interesting that during a leap year, which would be next year, July 31st is normally the 212th day with 153, but next year it'll be 213, kind of like Lupercalia. And I don't know how they do it, but they coded it to Abraham Lincoln's 212 and also to Lupercalia. I also went back and looked at the history again of Lupercalia, and it led me to a whole bunch of stuff that I knew, but I guess I didn't put it all together until a little bit ago. But Ides of March, the day that Julius Caesar died, even adds up to 56. And I'll actually probably make 2 parts to this video. It's just going to be too long. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in the second part. I also wanted to point out the mirror of 56 is 65. 65 and 56 even add up to 121, just like Revelation. We've mentioned Philadelphia so many times this year. Philadelphia is even in the book of Revelation. That's the last place that Pope Francis went when he came to the United States. But anyway, so Philadelphia adds up to the mirror of 56, 65. Ghostbusters 2, where they talk about the alien told her that the end of the world will be Valentine's Day 2016. That adds up to 65. Also, Knights Templar adds up to 65. And that's interesting because today also happens to be Friday the 13th, and that's a very special day with the Knights Templar. A bunch of them were even arrested by Philip the Fourth of France on Friday the 13th, and that's been suggested of the origin of the superstition. I mean, there's these other ones here as well, but interesting also, Philip the Fourth, he died on the 333rd day of the year. Philadelphia is 333 years old this year. Um, on this day of this year, it will be 33 days after the 333 anniversary, which also just so happens to be a Back to the Future day. It's October 27th, the 300th day of the year, with 65 days remaining. And this is the day that Back to the Future ends in 1985, when the train destroys the time machine and Doc Brown comes back in the train. Also, another Back to the Future day is November 5th. This is when he goes back in time to 1955. There's 56 days remaining until the end of the year. Lots of other things dealing with this day. Also, the gunpowder plot, the Guy Fawkes thing, whatever. Not going to go into that. Wanted to point out Philip the Fourth. Let's look at his name in gematria. He adds up to 56 and 101. I mean, interesting because Philadelphia adds up to 65 and also 101. This guy's name's Philip, even. Kind of like Philadelphia, or Phil at least. He even died at the age of 46. And that's just interesting because if you type out 56, it adds up to 46. So also, it says he annihilated the Order of the Knights Templar, which just so happened to be on Friday the 13th. Today is Friday the 13th. I mean, look at that. He's from France, Paris, France, whatever, Just think about it for a second. It's ridiculous. Also, in regards to Friday the 13th, in 2015, there's 3 days that are Friday the 13th this year, which it's a cycle. It happens, it's like in 2009 it happened, and it always happens on, or at least this cycle that I'm talking about always happens in February, March, and November, and it happens it's 3 years, 3 years, 11 years, 11 years, 3 years, 3 years, 11 years, 11 years, and so on, or whatever. Literally, the last time that there was a Friday the 13th this year was Pope Francis's anniversary as being Pope. March 13th, 313, the 133. I've talked about this over and over and over. Also, the time before that, Lupercalia, the first day of Lupercalia this year. Also, even the 65th prime number, 313. I mean, just pretty interesting stuff. Also, what did I just say about 881? I said it was the 213th day of the year. 56 days after today is 1-8, or also 8-1. But the one on Lupercalia this year happened 8 months after the last one. Then 1 month later was the next one. Then 8 months later was the one today. Also, just kind of interesting too, Lupercalia to today is also a span of 39 weeks. 39 is 13 times 3, the 313. So the next time that we have 3 Friday the 13ths in 1 year won't be until the year 2026, which literally starts on Lupercalia again, but 226. I'm telling you, the people who made our calendars, they are ridiculous. They made these on purpose, so all the stuff codes to this. It had to be that way. It's with the Roman calendar, it's with the Julian calendar, it's with the Gregorian calendar. But anyway, check it out. So 226 converted to the Julian calendar is literally the first day of Lupercalia. Also, today's an interesting day when you convert them. November 13th on the Julian calendar is the same as Halloween. And November, like if you change this to November 13th, it's November 26th, which this year, November 26th, is Thanksgiving. So today has ties to Thanksgiving and also Halloween. Even Thanksgiving adds the 141 and Halloween adds the 41. But I'm running out of time, so I'll see you in part 2.